All right. Looks like we've got a good quorum, so we will go ahead and get started. So my name is Jamie Nycree. I am the Legislative Director for Issue One. Issue One is a democracy reform nonprofit based here in Washington, D.C. And we're here today to talk about CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I think in order to understand what is happening with CISA today and why its work is so crucial, it's important to go back to why it was started. So in the 2016 election, U.S. intelligence agencies confirmed that there was widespread interference from Russian actors across all 50 states targeting vulnerable election systems, spreading false information and conspiracy theories about key candidates and the electoral process, and generally trying to sow discord and division among Americans. And Congress responded in full force to this. We saw first the Homeland Security Agency designating elections as critical infrastructure. Then Congress in 2018 created CISA. That effort was led by the Homeland Security Committees in the House and Senate, Michael McCaul in the House, and Ron Johnson in the Senate. Both Republicans led that effort. It was signed into law by President Trump and has been supported in a broad way by Republicans and Democrats ever since. It's been consistently funded at every step of the way. And that's in part because the work that CISA does is so critical. And that includes protecting our fundamental infrastructure from ransomware, cyber threats, countering foreign influence operations, as I mentioned, and working with election officials across all levels. I think it's important to note that while we're going to be talking today a lot about CISA's work protecting elections, it also applies to pipelines, water treatment plants, power grids, a wide range of critical infrastructure that is under threat more today than it ever has been. We've been seeing cyber attacks from Russia and from China getting increasingly sophisticated, especially with the rollout of new generative AI tools. And so this work is so crucial today, but none of that has stopped what we have seen over the last 8 weeks, which is a concerted effort to really freeze and halt a lot of the work that CISA is doing. So DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, launched an investigation into CISA on February 14th. The acting director of CISA froze all of the election security activities and fired and furloughed many critical election staff, including regional election security advisors, who, as our panelists will speak to today, provided a critical advisory role. They shut down key programs like the EI-ISAC, that's the Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center. It's a mouthful, but it does really important work to provide some of the cybersecurity analysis and shore up the systems that local and state election officials use. We know that elections officials are strapped and already don't have the resources that they need. Again, you'll hear about that today in this conversation. And so the EI-ISAC's work provided that at a dramatically reduced or often free rate. And that's going to be a critical piece that's now missing. Again, this wasn't just election infrastructure that was cut. We also saw cuts to CPAC, the Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Council, which was set up to coordinate between the federal government and the owners of critical infrastructure. So that's the owners of pipelines, the owners of power grids. Oftentimes, those are private individuals who don't necessarily have the same threat detection tools that the federal government has. And so that's why that coordination was so important. And that council was shut down. So all of this brings us to the conversation we're having today about what we are seeing over the last 8 weeks, what that means moving forward, and why CISA's work is more important than ever. And we have a great panel here to talk about those things. All are members of Issue One's Faces of Democracy program, which is our work lifting up the voices of election officials across the country, all the way from secretaries of state down to poll workers. But to get into it first, we have Wesley Wilcox, who is a nationally certified elections administrator. He's the supervisor of elections from Marion County, Florida. He was first elected in 2012 and is currently serving his fourth term. Prior to that, he was the assistant supervisor of elections, which is a position he held for 7 years, and he has over 34 years of experience in elections administration. Wesley has also served as the past chair of the EI-ISAC, which I just mentioned, and which has recently lost its funding from the current administration. Julie Wise has more than 25 years of experience in the field of elections, and since 2015, she has been serving as the Director of Elections for King County, Washington, which is one of the largest voting jurisdictions in the country. She is a nationally certified elections administrator and has led efforts to enhance voter outreach, election security, and process efficiency for her voters, and really focus on maintaining the public's trust in elections. She's been recognized for that work many times. Rob Rock is the Deputy Secretary of State for Rhode Island, where he oversees election administration and government transparency initiatives. He has over 20 years of experience in state elections operations and has played a really key role in modernizing his state's voter registration system. He's also served as the president of the National Association of State Elections Director, NASED, and he was chair of the Electronic Registration Information Center, ERIC, which many of you might have heard of, something else that has been slightly under attack recently. And last but not least, we have Kim Wyman, who has served at every level of election administration. She was the Thurston County Auditor for nearly 2 decades before becoming Washington's Secretary of State in 2013. She was only the second Republican woman to hold statewide office. She has served 2 terms and overseen statewide elections and cybersecurity initiatives. In 2021, she moved into a federal position at CISA, obviously very critical to this conversation, where she served as the senior election security advisor and helped protect the integrity of elections nationwide. Today, she serves as a senior fellow at the Bipartisan Policy Center. And Kim is going to be running the show today, so I will turn it over to her.
Well, thank you, Jamie, and thank you to Issue One for pulling together this event. And I want to welcome everyone to Safeguarding Democracy, CISA's role in protecting elections. So as you heard, all 4 of us have a long history of administering elections. And before I start this, I just realized if you are watching this and you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and we are going to try to get to the questions at the end. If we, for some reason, don't, we will make sure that we get back to you and answer your questions. But feel free to put them in as you have them during this broadcast. So 8 years ago, we took an important step in improving the security of our nation's election system when election officials began a partnership with CISA because of the president designating elections as critical infrastructure. And I know all 4 of us were in our roles at that time, and that designation provided state and local election officials direct access to partner agencies like the FBI and NSA, and no-fee services like membership in the EI-ISAC, cybersecurity assessments and trainings, and physical security assessments. So in those early days of the partnership, it wasn't without its challenges. And when I think back to 2017 and 2018, I remember it being a little bit bumpy. So Wesley, I want to start with you. As a local county election official, how would you describe the partnership in those early years?
Thank you, Secretary Wyman. Bumpy is a very good word. I can remember exactly where I was on the day that elections were deemed critical infrastructure. It was January 6, 2017. I was actually at a gathering of election officials in Washington. There were probably about 100 of us in the room. And I will tell you, probably to put it politely, the mood was not overly enthusiastic. Being a local election person, I recognize or actually fully believe that elections are ran the best at the state and local level. And all of a sudden having the federal government involved in this, quite a few of us were concerned with overreach or even, some call it Big Brother. And after the first couple of our interactions with those representing the federal government and CIS in this group, it quickly confirmed our thoughts that the federal government virtually knew nothing as it relates to elections. But I'll tell you, the team that CIS put together was extraordinary. They fully embraced the fact that they were not the experts in this and really knew virtually nothing as it relates to elections. And they went on a nationwide listening tour. They came to state conferences in Florida, I know across the entire US, meeting and learning and listening to election officials. So after about the first year, things started to greatly improve in that process.
Yeah, I would absolutely concur on every front. And I remember it really was that game change of Chris Krebs taking the role of the director and then hiring Matt Masterson, who really did connect with election officials in the way we all needed and really appreciated. So, Julie, as a director of one of the largest election offices in the country, did the critical infrastructure designation change the way that your office approached election security? And if so, how?
Thanks, Secretary Wyman. The critical infrastructure designation is incredibly helpful and important for us in regards to that it provided resources and support. I'm not sure that it was really the driving factor that influenced how we approached security. It's more, again, that the designation ultimately did come with resources. We've talked about that. Election offices aren't rich, so those resources are what really helped us shore up our security stance, both physical and in cybersecurity. And it was that support and, again, those tangible resources that proved to be invaluable to our elections office. For example, in those early years, we're really proud that we were the first election office in the country to invite the Department of Homeland Security to do a physical audit of King County elections ballot processing facility and the physical security of our ballots throughout the chain of custody in a vote by mail environment. The lessons that were learned there, though, from that audit, and then other audits that followed that I think we'll talk about a little bit later, that's what really helped strengthen our physical and cybersecurity.
Yes. Okay. So, Rob, you were the state election director at the time. What impact did the designation have on your state?
Thank you, Secretary Wyman, and thank you to Issue One for having this panel. It's an honor to be on here with three rock stars in elections. So thank you for the invite. The impact in Rhode Island was not only was it instant, but it was extremely influential. We were coming into a time where cybersecurity was rearing its head, and we really weren't sure, at least I wasn't sure, how to handle some of these issues we were facing. And so to have that partnership with people who knew how to handle the cybersecurity issues, it was a huge burden off of our shoulders to know that we had a new partner in elections that we had never had before. I can remember within months of the critical infrastructure designation, we had a risk and vulnerability assessment where CISA had some folks come into our office and set up shop and try to essentially do a red team exercise to ensure that we were as secure as possible. And it was really something that gave us a peace of mind to know that we had an extra set of eyes looking at the process. One of the other important impacts that it had here in Rhode Island is that when you have folks looking at and we're a small state, looking at our infrastructure, it also has the benefit, and Julie and Wesley have talked about this at the local level. So putting some resources down at the local level as well, I think it enhances everybody's view of cybersecurity. And I think all of us at the state and local level here in Rhode Island were able to take advantage of that. And even our local cities and towns and their networks, as we were trying to shore them up, also has an effect outside of the election offices in those towns where cybersecurity training became really important, something that CISA focused on. And not only election offices, but other government offices at the local and state level were able to receive some of these resources. So the impact was really important, and it was really quick And think about it, you've got a group of people who are experts in technology and cybersecurity, working with election officials who were not. And the CISA folks were not experts in elections. But I tell you what, it didn't take very long before there was a real understanding on both sides of the issue here, where we became certainly not experts, but certainly much more well-versed in cybersecurity matters. And they became, I would say, election experts. I have no doubt or no holdback indicating that CISA employees were and are election experts in many ways. And we're very grateful for that partnership.
Oh, absolutely. And I really do think it evolved during that 2017, 2018 period in a way that made that communication so strong, and there was a trust. And I think one of the big shifts I remember most in 2017 specifically was, before then, we looked at election security as keeping the bad guys out of your system. It was all a defensive posture. And when we started working with CISA, we realized that it was about resilience. And I think that that's what I've seen across the country is a real shift to it being about resilience and about thinking about what you're going to do when it happens and how you're going to respond and recover. And I think those are real big steps that we kind of take for granted now that came out of that partnership. And I'm proud of the things that we were able to build on that. So, when we're thinking back about this, I want to go to Julie next. What role did CISA play in King County's approach to election security? I mean, you touched on it a bit, but were there any products or services that your county used to improve your security posture, or was it something else?
Yes, so much. How much time do we have? Okay, but seriously, I think it's important to list through the actual deliverables that CISA provided to King County elections and across the country. Really impactful ahead of the 2024 presidential election, CISA created an interactive floor plan of our entire 100,000 plus square feet building that we were able to share with law enforcement so that they can be familiar with the building in case of an emergency. They also completed vote centers, because we do have in-person voting opportunities in vote-by-mail states. So they completed vote center assessments, ballot drop box location assessments, again, all ahead of the 2024 election. CISA also helped us to secure critically important grant funding for some really key safety and security upgrades, including a new PA system. That's really critical because unfortunately in King County, the year prior, we received 2 envelopes that had fentanyl in it. And so we needed to evacuate our building. So a new PA system to let staff know what was going on or if there's an emergency is critical. We were able to add 30 more additional new security cameras to the entrances and exits and all places where our ballots are being stored. A generator, ballistic film, provided de-escalation training. They provided support to us after those evacuations, as well as recommendations on mail safety handling that we've seen used across the country, and on safe evacuation processes, as well as contingency plans for swatting and insider threats. I had a monthly meeting with local law enforcement that CISA joined, and we were regularly talking and communicating together. And they provided sort of this brevity as well as a two-way dialogue of what we're hearing at the local level to help educate and inform, and what they're hearing at the federal level. It became a real partnership in safeguarding our elections. And that strengthens democracy across the entire country as we share and learn things and insights from cybersecurity, physical security concerns and efforts together.
Absolutely. Rob, what did you see happen over time with the partnership?
Well, just like anytime you've got a partnership, when you've got folks from different agencies working towards the same goal, it got better very, very quickly. I think, Secretary, you mentioned it, Wesley did as well. The start to the partnership was a little bit rocky, but I think it was because neither one of us, neither side, really knew much about the other. And so it didn't take long for that really to smooth itself out. But I think it's important to talk about that rocky start because it shows how everybody worked really hard to get to the same place. I mean, it wasn't long before CISA folks had a really good grasp on elections. But more importantly, it was really good for us to be able to talk about this cybersecurity this new thing for us with the media, with our locals, with our partners, because at the time we weren't sure what it was all about. And so to be able to work with CISA, they gave us the tools to talk about it like normal people and not tech folks, to try to understand exactly what multi-factor authentication is, and risk and vulnerability assessment, and penetration tests, and Albert sensors, and TTXs. All of that stuff now is easy for us to understand because we've been working with it, for several years, but it took us a little bit of time. And I like to focus on the tabletop exercises because those are the ways that CISA helped us work with our partners here in Rhode Island to talk about the issues that we needed to ensure that we were ready for the, not the if, but the when. I think, Kim, you said it great. I mean, we were, at least at the beginning, I was trying to do everything to avoid any sort of issues instead of saying, you know what, something is bound to happen. We've got to be ready for when it does so that we can bounce back very, very quickly and be resilient. So I think that as time went on, it quickly became a really good partnership because everybody was working towards the same goals, despite the fact that we were coming from multiple different agencies.
Yeah, absolutely. It is amazing to think back on how much progress we made over the last 7 years or so and moved our country's security forward. Wesley, as we fast forward from those early years of CISA, tell me about the types of resources and support you've received from the federal government that you wouldn't have had access to otherwise.
Thank you, Secretary Wyman. Although as the organization and the environment has matured, and now there are multiple offerings from the ISAC or CISA, probably the first and the easiest, because I was a very early adopter, and the product that I think helped build the community, and that's the Albert sensor. I know here in the state of Florida, I think I was the first, and a couple others just days after me. And I think the state of Florida actually became the first state that fully deployed Albert sensors in all 67 jurisdiction counties, as well as the Secretary of State's office. The product was not cheap. And with all due respect, Secretary Wyman, our secretary at the time, who is a great friend of the elections community, saw the value in the product and was able to actually do a cybersecurity grant that enabled even those fiscally underserved jurisdictions to install an Albert sensor. There are a lot of companies out there that can do a lot of the same type of items that what Albert does, which is monitoring traffic. It's not affecting traffic, it's monitoring and just it's passively. But what it did and what it does that no other product ever or could do is that it has a focus on elections offices. I'm the only elections office in Marion County, Florida, and my jurisdiction, Rob, I tell you, is larger than the state of Rhode Island. But I'm the only one here. And so them monitoring all 67 of us so that they can see a pattern. Is there something happening in Marion County, Florida, or Lake County, Florida? There are 17 Marion counties in the U.S. They're able to monitor and see is there some trend going on election related that nobody else was even following. And that gave us a leg up. And I really feel that is one of the first products that started this and allowed them to continue that growth that they did wonderfully over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think back to really that first few years of partnership with CISA, I think the real success story was 2020. And I say that because we were so focused on making sure we had cybersecurity and physical security in each of our election offices across the country that we were thinking in terms of resilience and planning. And so we were planning for all these different contingencies. And the one I think most of us planned for and didn't really believe would actually happen was a pandemic, let alone a global pandemic. And I think that all of that work we did between about 2017 and 2020 prepared us for COVID. And that was part of the reason why we were able to shift as a country to different ways of voting in a pandemic. And so I think that that's a success story. And so, you know, looking between 2020 and 24, Rob, what from your perspective was different in 2024 in terms of election security and the preparedness of election officials? And what role did CISA play in that?
Well, I have no doubt that 2024 was the most well-run, secure election that this country's ever done. And it was better than 2022, and 2022 was better than 2020, and 2020 was better than 2018. And mainly that's because of Wesley and Julie and the thousands of state and local election officials across this country running really good elections, but it's also our partners as well. And I think that, you know, with CISA and other federal partners had a lot to do with that. I know in 2024 alone, or in preparing for 2024 alone, CISA interacted with Rhode Island, you know, the smallest state in the country, several times leading up to the 2024 election, multiple times in person, speaking at our cyber summit that we run every other year, coming in for our TTXs, creating our last mile poster. I love our last mile poster. It's a poster that we designed a little bit different than some of the other ones across the country to talk to our voters about how secure and how we run elections in Rhode Island. And we asked all cities and towns to put them up in their offices. We put them in local libraries. And it was really important to have voters be able to understand how we run elections in Rhode Island and to know that they are safe and secure. And CISA was the driving force behind that, helping us with those products, helping us with those TTXs and all of that. And then we also received classified and unclassified briefings that really helped us figure out where we needed to pay attention. And I think that those things do not go unnoticed. I know sometimes they may be considered boring and you may not feel like you're getting a lot of information, but it shows that there's a partnership. There's a willingness to do whatever they can to help us out at the local level and at the state level. And so, you know, I also look at the EI-ISAC was mentioned earlier before. I mean, that was such a huge tool for us in Rhode Island to be able to take these really complex issues and water them down so that folks like myself, who doesn't have a technology background, can understand it, can talk about it, can work with our locals on it, can work with our state police and our media and other partners. It's really, really helpful. And I think anytime you've got a partnership that's lasted as long as CISA and election officials has, it's going to get better each time. And I have, no doubt that, should we continue to receive the services at the levels that we have before, 2026 is going to be even better than 2024. But we need to make sure that we continue with those services. And I think that that's a really important part of our work now, is working with the federal government and being a good partner.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. And one of the things that kind of hits me as we're talking about this too, is the power of this partnership is that it was voluntary. So any county or state that wanted these services, they were asking the federal government for them. It wasn't that CISA was forcing us to do any of those, take any of those services or participate in any of those activities. It was the local election official asking for that support and inviting CISA into their organization to help them make it better. So Wesley, what was your experience in 2024?
I'd like to echo a lot of what Rob said, in that 2024 was the best nationwide ran election that we've ever done. It was 2022 was good, 24 was better, and it continues to do that. The reality of elections, at least from my perspective, is they're on a 4-year cycle, culminating with that presidential general election, meaning although we conduct extremely important municipal, special, primary, even gubernatorial elections, nothing really compares to that presidential general election, especially in terms of volume. As a local, on election day for that presidential general election, we are doing literally everything possible that we can do to conduct the election at the local level. We're dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, depending on your jurisdiction, of polling places, thousands of election workers, hundreds of thousands of voters, vote by mail, all of the other things that are going on right here in our face, and physically here and doing those things. And it's all we can do. I mean, we're election folks on election day are tapped. I mean, we've got it. And so with the 4+ years of the TTXs or the tabletops, the gatherings, the briefings, what they did is they provided not only a deeper, more educated knowledge base just on how to handle some of the physical scenarios that we ran into. It gave us a great deal of peace of mind. I may have lost volume there for a second. Am I back?
You are back.
Okay, all right, sorry. Lost technology at its finest, right? But it gave us a great deal of knowledge that someone was watching our back from a cybersecurity perspective. So I'm gonna turn it back over to you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the things that happened in the 2020 to 2024 timeframe, when you think about presidential elections, that's when most voters vote. Most people don't vote in those off-year elections. So we're very busy at the local level, but always preparing for that 4-year presidential election. So Julie, we've talked a lot about security and the work that we did with CISA, but how do you balance security with transparency when you're discussing security risks and assessments with the public?
Yeah, I think that that's the delicate balance right there. And that's the delicate balance of being election administrators, right? It's sort of this teeter-totter of accessibility and security and transparency. In King County, we're unapologetic about that. We believe in radical transparency. We believe that voters need to trust their election system. In order to do that, you've got to be able to have eyes on it. You've got to be able to really see the operation, understand it. And so we want to be as transparent as possible. With some caveats, right? Under the law, Washington State prohibits disclosing information directly about site security. So an example of sort of how we balance, right, is that we widely share that we've had these physical and cybersecurity assessments done at King County elections, and that we've identified areas for improvement through each and every one of those. However, we tend not to get into the specifics of what each recommendation was or even every change that was implemented as a result of it. We also talk really broadly about the threats we've seen to elections and election workers and how these assessments, are really designed to keep our staff safe at work and our voters safe while voting. And so it's important to be upfront and clear that security and safety are priorities for our team, and without disclosing all of the things that we do to make that safety really possible. So I think it's a delicate balance, for in King County, Secretary Wyman, we have a 1/5 of a mile loop where you can literally transparent because there is glass walls and watch the elections process. But we've got security staff on hand, right? So it's that delicate balance of that security and transparency.
Yeah, and it's a challenge, and I know that's a challenge for every election official across the country, is giving the public enough information to be comfortable, but not telling them what we're actually doing so they can't, use that to their advantage to do something nefarious. So we often talk about cybersecurity, that there's no finish line and that we require ongoing investments in it. So let me stay with you, Julie. What would it mean to your cybersecurity efforts if there no longer was federal support, no fee services, cybersecurity assessments, trainings, that type of thing? Is there a way to quantify monetarily how much help CISA has given you since they, started this partnership? Because, you can hire private organizations for this work too.
Right. Cybersecurity is not a check the box one and done, right? It's a 365, 24/7, and it's constantly learning and making those defenses even stronger, right? So I don't know if I could put a monetary figure on it. I don't believe personally that there is a private company that can replace the resources from the federal government, period. That's my position. Even if cost were not an issue, which again, I do not know any elections office where that is the case. In King County, I think we could argue is pretty well resourced, with almost 1.5 million registered voters, that we do have more, more resources than some of our friends in rural counties, right? So even if the costs were not an issue, the budgets are not robust. And partners like CISA bring a commitment to public service, to safety, and they bring the full power of American intelligence and law enforcement that I don't see that you could see in a private companies. And I mean, let's be honest, private companies are looking to make a profit. I respect that. That's why they're in business, right? But protecting the security of our elections is not something that should be profit driven. It should be people driven. And so we're fortunate here in King County to have a dedicated team of IT professionals, including IT specialists that are certified in cybersecurity. That said, national supports like CISA and EI-ISAC are just, I think, irreplaceable. These agencies set best practices and baseline standards, and then work with us at the local level and the state level to achieve them. So we're not going to stop doing cybersecurity work, but losing those supports and losing those resources, that monetary part with grants means that we're going to lose more robust and comprehensive view of both the threats as well as being able to safeguard.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest concerns is that connectivity that we're potentially going to lose throughout the subsector, that we don't know what's going on at that kind of national bird's eye level view if CISA goes away or really cuts back on election security. Rob, what will it mean to your state?
Yes, I think Julie answered it great. I mean, there's going to be no entity that's going to be able to take care of what CISA did in general. We're going to be forced to work with multiple vendors on multiple different, projects. So, pen testing could come from one place, EDR could come from another, risk and vulnerability assessments another. That means we're going to be working with more vendors, and it's going to be more expensive. And to Julie's point about state budgets, I mean, we're now, because it's so uncertain of what's going to happen, we're working with our legislature, which is just like every other state, and we struggle with budgets, to make sure that we are ready should we get cut off from all of our services, because we have become so reliant on CISA and the services that they provide that we can't be without them. We have to figure out where to get them, and it's just going to be really difficult. And I can promise you that if we have to spend our state money on some of these services, some other part of elections is going to suffer. I don't know what that part is. I don't know if it's voterless maintenance. I don't know if it's we have to kick off buying new voting equipment because we can't afford to do our cybersecurity work and buy new equipment. I don't know what it is, but something's gonna suffer. And I think, I always consider, CISA and the elections community as a marriage. And to not have federal support would be the equivalent of being left at the altar, because we're going to be left without the ability to do what we've become so reliant on over the last 8 years to ensure that our system is as secure as possible. And because we've done such a good job with this partnership, with this marriage, we have to figure out a way to do it. And I'm not sure how we can do it and also keep up with all of the other election priorities that we have to keep our voter list accurate, to keep our equipment up to date, and all this other stuff. So without a doubt, it's going to be a huge detriment, not only to the state of Rhode Island and our locals, but across the country, without a doubt.
Absolutely. I know in my time, in state and local elections, it went from kind of a sleepy clerical position to a very technical, difficult position that is a high profile. Back in the day, no one really cared about what we did in the election office unless they lost, and then they really didn't care that much either. Anyway, Wesley, as you know, elections are primarily administered at a local level. So what is the importance or value of administering cybersecurity at a national level when everything else is really done with a local focus?
As I mentioned earlier, locals and even the states, by definition, we only have a limited viewer scope. And monitoring cybersecurity trends on a national level just provides a much broader vantage point. I can only monitor and prepare cybersecurity for this particular Marion County. But CISA and the ISACs on a national level, they're able to monitor all 17 Marion counties across the U.S. and be able to see those trends happening long before they would ever become apparent to any one of us, or even as a state. Some cyber, criminal or whatever else could hit 2 or 3 jurisdictions in the state of Florida, and we probably wouldn't pick up on it. We probably wouldn't see a trend. But if that same organization hit 2 or 3 in Rhode Island or Washington or Texas, somebody from a national vantage point is going to be able to see that. There is not a way, there is not a mechanism from a local or state perspective to replace that item right there.
Yeah, and I'll take it one step further. I think I talked about that connectivity, that connective tissue we've built over the last 8 years is significant because it's not just about cybersecurity. The information sharing element of CISA and this partnership really allowed a better threat assessment and response on the ground for local election officials. And I think the best example of that came in the 2024 election. It's happened in other elections as well, but we had bomb threats that were called into polling locations across the country in multiple states, and it's a large number. It's over a couple hundred. And not having that connectivity would have had a very different response in that because of the threat assessment that election officials on the ground would make. So you think about they were getting the information, they had a pretty strong suspicion it was coming from a foreign actor, and they were able, the feds were able to share that information across the country in real time on election day. So election officials, when they received these threats at a polling place, knew it's probably coming from Iran. So it's not going to be the guy down the street that we think might have planted a bomb. So now we can just take a law enforcement official with a dog and go through a polling place, not disrupt voting, and just make sure that it's still safe for voters and the workers. Now, without that information, that threat assessment could be very different. And it could be shut the polling place down for an hour and a half until we're sure there's not a bomb. And now you think about that on a scale across the country, that's problematic. And that is one of the things that keeps me up at night, is we're losing that national perspective. And what's that going to mean for responses in upcoming elections if we don't have that connectivity? So, all right, don't want to end on gloom and doom. So we're coming to towards the end, and I want to have some time to do the question and answer. So we're going to do a speed round for all of you. So what I'd like you to do in 60 seconds is tell me, what is your biggest concern with the changes that are taking place at CISA, and what gives you hope about the future of election security? So Rob, you go first, then Wesley, then Julie. You get the last word.
So the biggest concern is answering the last question, just not being able to get the level of service that we have been relying on from our federal partners. It's been something that we've really used to our advantage, and it's no doubt one of the biggest reasons why we've run well-run elections the last several years. But the reason why I'm hopeful is because of the people on this call, Julie and Wesley, you Secretary, and the thousands and thousands of election officials across this country that have been dealt pretty bad hands several times over the last several years. And I think that each time we have met the challenge. We've met the challenge with the pandemic. We've met the challenge with cybersecurity issues. We've met the challenge with people not believing in the integrity of elections, and we continue to run well-run elections. And I think that's a testament to the people, again, on this call and the people that are working in our offices and across the country. And that's what gives me hope. The people that are at the helm running these elections, without a doubt, is what gives me the most hope about elections in the future.
Probably my biggest concern is, how are we going to rebuild that national lens? I read a quote yesterday: good things are easily destroyed, but not easily created. And that national lens was a great example of that. My hope, Rob kind of alluded to this just a moment ago, the elections professionals, it is one of the, if not the most resilient, adaptive, and innovative communities we have in the United States, and we will be successful.
I'd have to ditto all of what Rob and Wesley have already said. My biggest concern is the same. It's that the support, the level of intelligence, that collaboration, and the credibility provided by CISA at the federal level is just not able to be replicated or replaced in any real meaningful sense. What gives me hope is what's already been said, is the people. The election administrators in this country are absolutely amazing, devoting their lives and their careers to democracy, because they love their community and they want to make sure that they have their voices heard. And they're a resilient group of people that have had a really rough go the last several years, unnecessary target of attack. And so I've got a great deal of faith and hope in our election administrators, and I would say voters alike as well. I think that for all the negativity that we get, we also hear a lot of thank yous and a lot of appreciation and keep up the good work regularly. And I think that that matters. I think it matters for our team as election administrators. And I think it's important to know that that really is the voice of the many. It's just sometimes the voice of the few can be the loudest. So a great deal of hope is in the people, voters and election administrators alike.
Agree 100%, 100%. Okay, we're gonna try to get to some of the questions in the chat. Susan Lerner asks, is the ERIC model a possible, albeit not ideal, response to the current defunding and absence of information and audit assistance situation? And I'm going to real quick just jump in, and I think we've kind of hit on this already. It is certainly an ERIC model is good. It's voluntary. States can choose to participate, but therein is the problem. If not everybody is engaging and participating, you don't necessarily have the big picture or all of the facts that you can share and make better decisions on the ground. Anyone want to jump in?
I'll just throw in a little bit as well. And unfortunately, like the ERIC model, sometimes people get a little offended and take their toys and go home.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, second question. What are your thoughts on how to fill the gap that will remain due to the cuts at CISA? How will elections be conducted safely now in the face of so many ongoing increasing cyber threats?
I'll take that one to start. There are companies that are able to provide the services that CISA has provided. It's just the challenge is that how you're going to pay for them. We've been very fortunate to be able to get a lot of these services for free or at very small costs, and so now we're going to be forced to figure out another way to do that. And I think that that's where the challenge lies. Is that every state budget that I know of is struggling. Every local budget's a struggle, and so to try to fill those gaps is very difficult. But we do have strong IT support. We've got really smart people in elections. And I still think that every problem that's been thrown our way over the last several years has been met. And I think that it's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. There will be bumps. But I think that I am confident that the gaps will be filled. I just think that, it really should be from the federal government. It should be from the entity that's been providing these services. And I'm certainly not going to give up hope that we're going to continue to get some sort of help and service from the federal government, but we have to figure out alternatives, and we are working in Rhode Island to fill those gaps. It's just how we're going to do it, but I'm confident we will.
I was just going to add that I think that not to put Rob on the spot, but I think a lot of election folks at the local level, at the counties or parishes, are going to be looking to be collaborating more with the secretaries of state, right, to really help try to get specifically the securing funding component from legislatures or from grants. And again, that collaboration and support there as well. I think maybe we'll see that even maybe increase a bit.
Okay, let's go to the next question from Zabray Valentine. Recognizing the threat to the perception of the integrity of the elections in 2020, culminating in the events on January 6th, would anyone here have done anything differently or recommended other election officials do so? What are the lessons that you learned?
I guess I'll pop in. First off, the 2020 election, November, because that was the date that was referenced in there, was until 2024, the best federal election ran in the nation. I mean, I don't know what else, knowing what we knew then, that we could have done that had that election run any better than it did.
And to hop on that too, I mean, I think it's incumbent upon us, election officials, to talk about the processes that we each have in our own jurisdictions. I don't know the exact processes in Marion County, Florida, or King County, Washington, but I can tell you what, there are guardrails, there are procedures, there are rules, there are laws in place to ensure that there are well-run elections. And I think it's really important to get out and talk about what we do, even as it's as boring as it is, on how a mail ballot gets certified, or how a polling place gets designed, or how machines are delivered before election day. All of that matters to voters to know that. They may not want to hear all of it, but I think the more that we're accessible, the more that we're transparent, the more that we're out in the community talking about this stuff, that's how we combat the folks who don't believe in the integrity of the election. It's important that, because I am so confident that the elections in this country are well run, that I'd put any election administrator in the country in front of a group of people in their own jurisdiction, and if you give them a half an hour to explain the process, I guarantee you're going to walk out much more confident in the process. It's just really difficult to do that because there are so many jurisdictions and so many voters to talk to. But I think the more we get out there, the more we educate, the more confident people will be in elections, and ultimately we're all going to be better because people are going to believe in the democracy.
Okay, and Zabray has a related question. What are the most important things election officials can do to ensure the election above reproach in 2026? I'm on a county oversight commission in California. This is a big question for us and others, obviously. Anyone want to take that?
I think Rob really answered it really well, which is, I think that, again, it's going into 2026 election is that you're still doing what we've already been doing, right? Again, running the best, most accessible, transparent, accurate elections. We keep demonstrating that we are by educating and doing outreach and sharing and providing that level of transparency. If it's web cameras to show elections processing, or you're doing tours, or you're providing, trainings and education opportunities. I think that's the same thing that we do going into 2026. I think also there's ways in which to demonstrate that. Everyone's got their own sort of audits, but I think that audits also can come in handy. I think of risk limiting audits, or you think of batch audits, we call them in Washington State. I think there's ways I'm trying to say that you can actually demonstrate that the results are accurate, and share that with voters as well.
Fiona Gleason asks, do states still have access to Help America Vote Act grants, including election security grants? And I've been away a while, but I'm pretty sure that states do, and it's state by state, because if you didn't spend your Help America Vote Act grants and still have some of that money, you may be still using it. But I'm not aware of any new funds that Congress has allocated for Help America on Help America Vote, and they have, allowed some election security grants, and those are coming at a little bit at a time. I don't think it's quite the $3.2 billion that HAVA was, but anyone have something different or want to add to that? Okay, we're not going to take a shot at Congress because, it's not a good move right now. So I'm going to move on. I'm a member of Issue 1's Council for American Democracy. What can we do as citizen leaders to help and support all and support CISA?
That's a great question. I'm glad it was asked because I wanted to mention it anyway. For the 113 people that are on this call, for those of you that are not election administrators, we need your help, talking to your network, talking to your family, talking to your friends, about elections processes and elections education, because I think it's going to take a village. We are election administrators. There's only so many of us, but you have wide nets. You have people that trust you and respect you. And so to be able to get out into the community and work with your election administrators and talk about the security of elections, I think it's really, really important. The more that we talk about it, the more people are going to be confident. We saw it in Rhode Island when we did our voter integrity tour, and people without a doubt walked away. 100% of the people that came to our events walked away with more information than when they came. And there's no reason why we can't have civil conversations at the dinner table or at a holiday event or at a work party or wherever. We can have those conversations. I know we can do it. And it's important that you help us out and engage your network and talk about how elections are run in your jurisdictions, because I can tell you what, people listen to you, they believe you. And I think the more that we talk about it, the better we're going to be.
Okay, yep. We are kind of getting at time, so I think, Rob, you're going to have the last word here. I will say that remember that in your communities, you have probably more influence with your neighbors and your family members than all of us combined. We are election officials. We do things very well. I'm a former, of course, but they're still in the trenches doing that work. But I can tell you that when you're, person that your kids go to school with, or a person from your house of worship, or the person that you work with is sharing something, you believe it a little bit more because you know them. So if you can go and do a tour of an election office and learn about those processes and share, or become a poll worker, another thing that's helpful, share all those security measures you see, it goes a long way. So I want to just take a moment to thank Wesley Wilcox, Julie Wise, and Rob Rock for being here today and sharing their insights on this new challenge in election security. And we're going to get through it together, because we do. And for those of you who have moments where you're starting to lose faith in the process, or worried about the future of democracy, I remind you that we're about to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our country's Declaration of Independence. Don't lose sight of that. It's going to get bumpy, but you know what? We've been here a long time, and I have confidence because of people like Julie and Wesley and Rob. We're going to get through it together, and we're going to keep fighting the good fight. So thank you all for what you do, and thank you to Issue One for pulling together this event, and we hope you enjoyed it.